So here is the theme song for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Happy days are here again. Now that he's there and he's got this really cool cigarette to smoke. Look at that smile. How can you not be happy when you see that smile? That is the theme song from his 1932 election campaign. And then, they play it over and over and over again, kind of like I'm playing right now. But anyways, so we'll get that out of the way. A couple people said they liked the music. A couple people said they didn't like the music. But we'll go ahead and go with it. All right, so the topic for the day, Granite Bay High School, and anybody else tuning in because you have nothing else to do and your Netflix expiration has happened, or maybe just watch everything that's possible on Netflix. That might be the case, too, in this coronavirus quarantine reality. The New Deal of Franklin Delano Roosevelt is going to be the thing that saves the United States during the Great Depression, and we'll take a look at that as we go through the day. But it's important to remember, again, that for the AP history folks, they want to know, where did the thing come from? What was the cause and the effect? What is the once upon a time, the happily ever after? Well, the once upon a time is that the United States had come out of World War I, the leading economic power in the world. England was exhausted. France was really exhausted. Germany had been beaten to pieces and then had a revolution of sorts, of which Hitler's going to take advantage of, at least twice. And so the United States comes in the 1920s as this incredible economic powerhouse. The problem was, when we ramped up to build stuff for World War I, we ended up having too much stuff and too much productivity. So one of the things that makes the Roaring '20s roaring is the advent of this new process called consumer credit. At the time period, there weren't credit cards because we hadn't invented plastic yet, per se, but there were the ideas of being able to buy something when you didn't have the money to buy something. And we'll just charge you a little interest on it. And so this is the beginning of this time period. It's also a pendulum swing back and forth as we take a look at the idea of progressivism, so Teddy Roosevelt, Taft, and Wilson being swept away by Warren G. Money Pimp Daddy Harding, just like Clinton is going to have it happen to him by George Bush and Dick Cheney, and just as that, Barack Obama and Joe Biden, possibly the next president, depending on how people feel about all this process, is going to be swept away by Donald Trump and Mike Pence. So we're going to have our pendulum swing. But the important thing to remember when you come to the idea is that the 20s was not just a Republican-dominated decade, it was an old guard Republican-dominated decade. It was a decade of business of America is business kind of mindset. And that was the Coolidge prosperity. Basically, take off regulations on business, let them do whatever they want to. If they want to hire kids as young as 6 again to start to work in the factories, do it. It's not as if every factory is hiring kids as young as 6, but some were. And so we have this time period where it's an uptick, huge economic spike of the economy. Now, that's not the overall economy. That's basically just the stock market. But as you know, in this time period, we have Daddy Warbucks having made so much money on World War I that he's now able to do all kinds of stuff. Well, Coolidge is not going to run again in 1928. The Republican Party is going to turn to the whiz kid, the guy who fed Europe during World War I, the great engineer, Herbert Hoover. The Democrats are going to try to go with the Tammany Hall guy in 1928, Al Smith. Al Smith is the guy who basically tamed Tammany Hall, but still allowed it to play the game of politics, because that's what you need to do. But he was a Catholic. So 1928, the KKK hitting its high point in this time period, reaching into the Midwest and Indiana, taking really hard root there. And also in Oregon, they come out against Al Smith, the Catholic. And it's going to be the 1928 election where you see people like this over here, Uncle Sam with his strange fuzzy hat, basically saying nothing doing to the communists, the Irish rum drinkers, and Rome, i.e. the Catholics are going to close the White House. The KKK will not be open to Catholics during this time period. So that's election 1928. Now remember, the election 1928, sorry, Al Smith, I'm kind of blocking you here. The election 1928, the most important thing to remember about it is going to be that not only did the KKK come out, but that KKK, no Catholic being in the White House, put them into quite a quandary, because they are also still the yellow dog Democrats, the solid South that's supposed to vote from basically, Virginia down to North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, all the way to Texas and Florida. That's supposed to be the solid South. That's supposed to be more or less the 11 Confederate states and a couple of the pissed off slave states that felt like they got screwed over by Lincoln in the 13th Amendment. But he breaks them. Only the deep cotton belt solid South is going to stay the yellow dog Democrats. So that's one of the things to remember about the 1928 election. So Hoover comes in with a big win. That was the 1924 election. So Hoover comes in with a big election, bigger than Calvin Coolidge had done. He even takes Wisconsin. Wisconsin's like, Bob LaFont, we're done with you. And so you have Hoover start his presidency as this great guy that everyone's thinking, man, this guy's going to be an amazing president. He could be the best we've ever had. Even Franklin Delano Roosevelt felt so. That was a quote from him from 1920. So he takes over the presidency. Calvin Coolidge looks like, I'm going to go take another nap because I'm still sad about my son dying because of a tennis little match. Got a blood blister. But anyways, here comes Hoover. Look at how much he's smiling. He's having a great time. Gets sworn in by William Howard Taft. gives a great speech, and in the speech he basically said, well, not a great speech, it's a well-written speech. He was never a very good public speaker. His speeches were more like, my fellow Americans, I believe that you can hear me through radio, which is really cool. So we are closer to ending. In this inaugural address, he basically promised the country and the world we are closer to ending poverty than in any other country's lifetime. Remember, it's March 4th. This is going to be one of the last times. There's only one more time left, 1929. So this is going to be his saying, hey, things are going to be great. And the karma gods are going to then kick him square in the teeth. Now, he will call Congress into special session to help out farmers, which is something nobody had done. Even Cleveland hadn't done that back in the 1880s and 90s. But about as soon as things are getting ready to go and things are working well, boom, the stock market crashes. Black Thursday and then Black Tuesday. Black Tuesday is going to be the one that's even worse than this one on Monday, October 28th, because what happened in essence, if you remember that in the stock market, to make money, it's a basic, simple process. Buy low, sell high. No better way to make lots of money in the stock market by having an incredible crash, Black Thursday, come in on Friday and Monday, buy, and then all of a sudden at the last moment when people are going, oh my God, the stock market has saved itself, pull the rug out from underneath it again. And that's exactly what kind of happened this time period. So since the stock market really isn't the economy, and you'll learn this in AP macro, micro, or regular just economics, or just by reading anything, the economy is going to hobble along, but the stock market's going to have its ups and downs because the stock market is based on what people think the future will be like. So because of this, Hoover will try as best he can to reassure people throughout his 3.5 years of being president while the economy is in its first stages of the Great Depression to tell people things are good and fine. Prosperity is just around the corner. Look, it's already going up. It's going up and it's going down. Oh, and it keeps going down, 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 down. So Hoover, in essence, is going to be taken over when this thing goes here. Now, it feels like it's such a big drop, it can't go anywhere but up. But then it comes down the backside of Mount Everest to the market low right around 1933, 1932, right before the election, and then as FDR is taken over. So in the moment of panic, the Republican-controlled Congress, don't worry about reading Chapter 42 notes for Thursday. I got to take that. I don't know. It doesn't show up on mine. Anyways, they will pass the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. It is one of the highest tariffs the United States ever had since the Tariff Abomination of 1828. And it will more or less just cause the entire global trade system to have a cardiac arrest. And while it does boost up things, and the plan was we can just get through the midterm elections, then we'll be fine. Well, it didn't work. The other countries of the world basically had reciprocal trade tariffs. We ended up having a trade war, and then everything falls apart. So the U.S. depression becomes a global depression, thanks to my glasses seem so awkward. Maybe it's just my face. Because of this Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act 1930. Hundreds of economists asked, begged, pleaded with Hoover not to sign it. But Hoover, not being a professional politician, kind of then bowed to the professional politician and said, Mr. President, you can take this thing off. We'll actually move it, but we got to get through the midterm elections. Because if we don't get to the midterm elections, we're going to have a problem. Well, the problem with this is, again, very simple. Don't get it complicated. The United States has grown in its industrial capacity. We make more than we can actually use. So we have to sell to outside countries. So what happens when we put the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act is that other countries stop buying our stuff, which basically means our factories start going like crap, and they start laying off even more people. And then more people go, I don't even have a job, I can't buy anything. So then less stuff is bought. And so the companies then lay off more people. We're now on that vicious downward spiral, just like the farmers have been. So the United States then calls in a lot of loans. Well, these loans that we had made during World War I that we talked about before that are being paid back with interest, when Germany basically went into its hyperinflation, we then sent it a loan, and it then kind of had its hyperinflation issue. So we sent a loan called the Dawes Plan to Germany, and then we want money back. They're going to be able to pay back Britain and France. And they're going to pay us back too. Well, we call these loans back as this economy crashes out. Well, that just spirals Germany even deeper. Germany will go into about 30-35% unemployment. The United States will be around 25-30% unemployment. That's the deepest point. It is in that desperation that in 1932, the same time that Franklin Delano Roosevelt is going to challenge Herbert Hoover for his re-election bid, Adolf Hitler will challenge the president of Germany, Paul von Hindenburg, the man who could then suck in helium and float across Germany as the Hindenburg, and then it blew up. But anyway, so this whole depression is going to have a kind of trickle down, vicious spiral down because of a number of issues. But one of the most important is the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act. Now, because of this Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, this is important to remember. Beep, boop, 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 beep, 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 boop. Those Sound effects are for free. What the United States has decided in the post-war world, if you take a look at this, until recently under President Trump, is that the best economic system for global trade is to have very low tariffs. These are in essence just revenue-generating tariffs. These are protective tariffs. Protective tariffs are designed to be up around 30, 40, 50, 60%. So that means exports of America are going to get hit because when we're trying to keep people from buying our stuff, they're going to keep from buying our stuff. So this, in essence, means imports coming into the country are going to be pegged with a 40, 50, 60, 70% tack on. So something that costs $1,000 will actually cost $1,500 by the time you buy it. These are protective tariffs. These are revenue-generating tariffs. And all the way up to the 2016 election, where both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump said that, hey, what we need is a protective tariff. We got to get out of these Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP things. So tariffs are still an issue. They're going to be an issue for a long, long, long time. Look at this. It's going by so fast. Time goes by when you actually. So what we have basically is world trade plummeting. And by the time we get to the 1930 midterm election, which is a midterm election, not a presidential election, the Democrats will take the House, and that is going to be the kiss of death for Hoover. So the Democrats see a great chance to win in 1932. This will be the first time that one of the two parties actually hires a series of professional investigators to start writing op-ed pieces, investigative journalism pieces against Hoover to make it look like he's this multimillionaire who doesn't really give a crap about the everyday common people as this depression gets worse and worse and worse, which is actually kind of funny because he's one of the few presidents to not take the money. And granted, he didn't need it, but he was also one of the kind of presidents that didn't toot his own horn. So he didn't say anything about his not needing it. He just didn't take it. He sent it to the Red Cross. So he's going to start in 1932 as this thing's getting worse and worse and worse to try to find a way to jumpstart the economy. And he comes up with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, the RFC. Now remember, the RFC is not the KFC. That's Kentucky Fried Chicken. It is based on Keynesian economics, and Keynesian economics is real simple if you need to. If the economy goes into a depression or a recession, John Maynard Keynes of Keynesian economics says you've got to jumpstart the economy. The government should buy things, build things, pump money in. It doesn't matter. You could pay people to rake leaves. You could pay people to build bridges. You could pay people to teach kids. You could pay people to have more doctors. It doesn't matter. John Maynard Keynes said under Keynesian economics, if the economy is in free fall, government pump in money. Now, the part about Keynesian economics that is not necessarily known is that if the economy starts to pick up, you don't keep putting money in. If the economy picks up and it's got too much inflation, too much activity, if too many people are making too much money, as if that's even possible, the American dream, then the government's supposed to tax people to pull money out of their hands to keep inflation lower. That part politicians almost never do, because we're a country that is built, born, are kind of like, hey, what's your sign? Our opening line as 13 colonies was, do you hate taxes too? Because we sure hate that stamp tax. That's kind of where we started. So the backside of Keynesian economics, the part that you're supposed to do when the economy picks up too much, most politicians don't do. So it's been given the perception by many people of the Republican Party, especially, and conservatives, that Keynesian economics is tax and spend democratic, liberal economics. It's not. It is nonpartisan. The actual basic idea of Keynesian economics is the government's got to play a regulating role. So what Hoover's going to start to do is he's going to fast forward construction of things, even though it's going to cost money and we're going to go in debt, of the Boulder Dam. And the Boulder Dam will end up being something that had been started in the 1920s, but when he was Secretary of Commerce, he then kind of helped push this thing through. It ended up being named after him by the time everything's said and done. But the Boulder Dam is also important because it holds Megatron. And we know what Megatron can do when he starts going around pissing off, all the different kind of transformers. So Megatron is going to be there. Hoover's going to start doing other kind of stuff. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation will kind of work, but not work enough. And Hoover bills pop up all over the place. Next thing you know, by 1932, we have these bonus marches on Washington. And the bonus marches are former World War I vets, including guys that don't have very good dental coverage, that are begging Congress to help them out. We were willing to die for this country when you needed us back in 1917. Now we need you to sign these checks. Give us our checks. Well, the checks are never going to be cashed. So instead, the United States Army is called out, led by Douglas MacArthur, to basically chase these bonus marchers out. So sadly and ironically, in the summer of 1932, the last time that the United States cavalry was actually used in action was against our own vets from the war from before, World War I. So sons were being called out to basically chase off their fathers. Yeah. So our bonus march is going to blow up, and Hoover's going to get the blame for it, just like he's getting the blame for everything else, including Uncle Sam getting shot in the eye back over here. And that will lead to then the 1932 election. Now remember, this was Hoover in 28. Big win. This is then Hoover in 1932. Big loss. So he ended up getting a handful of states: Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Delaware. But other than that, the country went for Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal. Now, it's again important to remember when we talk about an electoral win, that's a huge electoral win, right? 89% to 11%, it's almost 90 to 10. But the actual popular vote was not that big. The popular vote was actually still pretty balanced, all things concerned. So when it comes to elections, it's important to decipher and be able to differentiate for the for the AP test and other people. So say I. The electoral college versus the popular vote. The popular vote doesn't choose a president. It's more or less a glorified poll that then tells electors what to do. So it's a big win, but he also gets both houses of Congress, and that's going to be huge for him. Now, this we talked about before is because he's pissed off that the first thing that Franklin Delano Roosevelt is, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But he then says in an inaugural address on March 4th, the last March 4th in 1933 that we ever had, that we need to be able to have action. We got to do something. In essence, it can only be accomplished, fixing the economy, by directly recruiting the government itself, treating the task as we would treat an emergency of war, which means I need near dictatorial power, the same kind of power Lincoln had during the Civil War to do what it needs to. I shall ask Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis, broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency. In other words, I need to be basically a dictator. So he is sending the word out to Congress. You stand in my way as I try to fix this thing, and I will find a way to basically crush you. It is very similar to Donald Trump, President Trump, using tweets to basically just bash anybody who challenges him. Well, that's already been done by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He just did it in a different way. So we have the New Deal. It looks like the New D with it, but basically, sorry, because my head's over here. The New Deal, he will start to then talk to the American people through this medium of radio. Again, a parallel, if you want to do for the AP test, is just like President Trump has used the tweeting system. And Americans feel, they wake up in the morning and they feel like the president on the East Coast is already talking to them. You get them on their tweets like, God, it's like he's talking to me. Well, we already felt this. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the master of the game before Donald Trump was the master of the game. And he would use radio with his soothing voice to actually make it sound like he was sitting there talking to you. And you could listen to the radio while you're knitting or while you're doing Sudoku or whatever you're doing. And it felt like he was there. Twice a week, he would have press conferences. And the press would come in, they would talk to him, and he would be answering kind of chummy. And he was really good at talking to people and making them feel like they were. Now, remember, we've talked about the idea of the pendulum swing and the moderates versus, we already talked about this in class, the idea that if you're a moderate president, you're going to end up earning the hatred of everybody on the edges. And that's one of the things that happened to Lincoln. Well, in a similar way, we have kind of totalitarian governments versus democracy. And then we have our liberal versus our conservative. We don't change, we want things to stay the same. And again, we have, in essence, this idea of economic feudalism. One king owns everything. Communism, everybody owns everything together, but the state organizes it for everybody. Well, under this time period, we have fascism that is basically one governmental party system working alongside of big business. They are one kind of the fist of power. So the fist of power versus communism, which is also a totalitarian dictatorship. They're going to make everybody share everything, like Joseph Stalin after he basically offs Lenin. At least that's the theory that happened. So we have capitalism on this edge, socialism on this edge. Now remember, these are two economic systems that are not as extreme as the outside systems. Fascism is basically you play the game of letting us run the government and we'll let you make big money. And that's what Hitler's going to do with a number of different German companies. You may recognize some of them. Mercedes-Benz, Bavarian Motor Works, BMW, Siemens. There's a handful of other, and then communism is you will do what I tell you to, comrade, or else I'll send you to Siberia. Well, socialism is not as extreme as communism. Socialism is an economic system where the government runs and operates the things everybody needs. For example, public education, fire stations, police departments, roads. Capitalism is the government doesn't own or operate anything. You actually have a private police system. You have a private fire department. You have a private owned roads, and you pay to drive on them. So in between these two extremes are going to be restricted capitalism. Restricted capitalism is going to be where the government plays the role of referee and regulates stuff. That is what it did during the progressive movement, all the way to World War I when it took over some of the steel companies and railroads. Well, that's in essence where Franklin Delano Roosevelt does. With one exception, the Tennessee Valley Authority, the federal government does not, despite what people tend to think of him, especially conservatives, the federal government didn't own, operate, run things. They poured billions of dollars into building stuff, but with one exception, Tennessee Valley Authority, they almost always ended up hiring private companies to do the work of building things. But the government was kind of running it. So what you have then is this kind of regulation. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is not going to just give money to people to sit around and do nothing, just like Herbert Hoover didn't want to do that. Herbert Hoover felt that if you gave money directly to people, they would just start to become addicted to it. If you then give them welfare money, they're going to actually be there all the time. All right, so here then is the contrast for you, because you got to be able to kind of split the difference here. Hoover is president during that time period, and it starts with the stock market crash. So that's really good economy, 5% unemployment. That is like ideal. We've been around 2.5%, 3%, 4%. Now we're up to like 20, 25, 30% now because of the coronavirus. But in his taking over the presidency, it had become about as low as it possibly could. When he leaves on March 4th, it'll be the highest it's ever been in American history. Now, if you take a look at this is an incline that if it kept going up, would have been even worse. We would have been up to 40, 50, 60%. But that plateau where it starts to get better, but it doesn't ever go down, but it's getting better, it's increasing less quickly, he's flattened the curve, is after the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. But it never gets better. It doesn't get anywhere close to getting back to normal. That is Hoover's presidency, right? So the way to look at it is like economy is getting worse, going deeper. So that is unemployment. So it's not good if unemployment numbers go up. So if you see a chart and it's going up, that's not a good thing. The chart basically says that it's unemployment, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So you got to look at it as like the economy's going down. But that is basically his presidency. Never gets back to close to normal. Never, but it does get better. Now, Adam Smith had been kind of the godfather, having come to the mindset of America in the time period, being frustrated with England and its mercantilist policies. In the exact same year that we declare independence, 1776, in the exact same year we declare independence, he in essence declares that the economy should be free to do whatever the economy should do. And he comes to this idea of the laissez-faire, don't touch it, the hands off of the economy, don't touch it, right? So if somebody's trying to grab your stuff, go, laissez-faire, don't touch it, the economy, don't touch my stuff. So the idea that is kind of dominant in America's political system is we need to be Adam Smith-like. We can't touch the economy. We got to be able to let it go. That is the opposite of Keynesian economics. The Keynesian economics is you got to run stuff all the time. The government's got to be toy management, named after John Maynard Keynes of Britain. So Adam Smith is supply side, just let the government stay out, which ironically the United States has almost never done. If you remember back all the way to Alexander Hamilton, my name is Happy Days Are Here Again. Anyways, Alexander Hamilton's time period, the government has always been taking the side of business on some level or another in terms of tariffs. Under true market-based Adam Smith laissez-faire capitalism, the government would have no tariffs. It would just kind of sit back and go, we're not going to screw with the economy. If you want to buy stuff from Britain, buy stuff from Britain. You want to buy stuff from our stuff, hey, it's your choice. So what we have is kind of a wrestling match in terms of this. Again, remember, inflation, you tax. Deflation, you spend. That's the basic idea. And you can spend on anything. You can spend on building up your military. You can spend on having your military dig ditches. You can spend on military having cool uniforms and you pay people to have them. It doesn't matter. Generically, jumpstart the economy by getting the economy moving. All right, but that in a time of recession or depression means going into billions of dollars of debt. Now, ironically, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was running against Hoover in 1932, one of his biggest criticisms is that Hoover was running us deeper and deeper into debt, which he was. So what you have in essence is expenditures and then intake, and the difference is the deficit yearly. So he is going and spending us into billions of dollars of debt. And so in 1932, he's saying, like, if I'm elected president, I will balance the budget, meaning those two lines are going to be right along that zero. That I will balance the budget. And he's like, you can't right now because we don't. And anyway, I will balance. That's what he promised. Well, that's when he takes over in 1933. So this cartoon showing this America's billions of government spending going into the billions and the actual taxpayer going like, come back. This is from 1932, and this is an anti-Hoover cartoon. That's what that cartoon is. And so when Franklin Delano Roosevelt becomes president in this time period, and we played this game, what ironically going to then boost the economy is going to be World War II. So he wins. He starts coming up with all his alphabet agencies, and he's like, and we have a brains trust coming out of Columbia University. There's a bunch of like super smart people who are experts in their field, professors, doctorates in, and he gets them. He says, hey, we got to do something. anything. Now, notice up here he says, of course, we may have to change remedies if we don't get results. So here's Congress, and he's basically saying, we're going to do all these different alphabet soup things. And in 100 days, he's going to create a whole bunch of alphabet agencies. 100 days, meaning he's going to call Congress into special session. Congress is supposed to go home in December 1933. He's inaugurated March 4th, 1933. He calls them into special session. Now, Hoover had already done this, but didn't get a whole lot of clank, because Hoover wasn't really about tooting his own horn. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, understanding politics, is about, no, you got to let people know that you're doing a great job. So he then talks about this. He calls Congress into special session. They stay for 3 almost straight months, thus 30 days a month, 3 months in a row, that's 90, add 10 on there, and it's 100 days. Congress, in essence, is working over their summer break. And they create all these kind of alphabet agencies, as you see over here. The CCC, the AAA, the WPA, all these different things to help out Uncle Sam to get better. And if it doesn't work, we're going to try. And this is probably part of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's brilliance. He will be the first person to tell you, I don't know anything. When John Maynard Keynes was actually interviewed about having talked to the president, he in essence comes out and says, well, quite interesting. Your president's a wonderful man. All things concerned, he's very, very gracious host. He doesn't know the first thing about economics. Well, Franklin Delano Roosevelt would have been the guy to tell him if he was standing right there, which he wasn't at the time period. Plus, he had polo, so it wasn't standing very often unless he had his braces on. But he would have been the guy to tell you, I don't have to know economics. I get people. I get people who help me out with this stuff. My job is to kind of lead the country. I don't need to know everything, which is why Hoover kind of flailed in this thing. He kept trying to understand everything because he was super, super smart. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was like, yeah, I barely got through Yale. Anyways, one way or another, then Hoover doesn't have what Roosevelt has. And what Roosevelt has is a friendly Congress. And so as a friendly Congress then helps him, he gets past stuff over and over and over again. Hoover could have maybe done that, but he didn't have a friendly Congress. He had a divided Congress. So what you have then is Franklin Delano Roosevelt comes in and starts, woo, tax and spending with his alphabet agency. Look at him, tax and spend the crap out of. If you look at it close, yeah, he does tax and spend more than Hoover did, but not astronomically. I mean, if you compare Hoover's last year to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's, might this be part of bipartisan propaganda? The two parties trying to screw each other? Okay, so here's Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He takes over March 4th, and the ideal is to get us back down to that, 5% unemployment. Now notice that World War II is going to be the thing that gets us down there. But if you really want to compare the New Deal and are asked the question, did it fix the Great Depression? The answer is no. It didn't get close. It's still sitting around 20-21% unemployment. But, and this is a huge big but, it was always getting better. With one little exception in this time period right there, and that is called the Roosevelt Recession. And that is because, and it's so much fun when you just get into the kind of the nitty-gritty of it, having promised in 1932 that he would balance the budget, in 1936 he reduced spending in order to prove on paper that he had balanced the budget as he had promised back in 1932. But the economy wasn't ready to stand on its own 2 feet yet, so it starts going into deep unemployment. So that part right there is the Roosevelt Recession, 1937. It's a result of his having balanced the budget in 1936 in order to prove to the American people, I lived by my promise. And in essence, that would have been like someone more or less saying to a patient that is on life support, you've been on there long enough, you can get off of it. And it's, I'm fine. And he just yank everything off. All right. So as soon as the election's over, then he starts spending again and we start going back down. So the overall idea is that under Roosevelt, it was always getting better. It didn't fix the economy. What fixed the economy, when everything's said and done, is war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. Woo! Whoa. Well, actually, here's then the spending. War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again now. It's great for ending depression. And lots of lives. But we'll talk about that later. All right, so here then is his New Deal. And his New Deal is going to come up with all kinds of different alphabet agencies, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. The more I read, the more I kind of come across and like, wow. So we're going to talk about a couple of them. All right, so they're like a periodic chart of all his different things and all the people that worked with him. You don't need to have them memorized, but you got to have a couple of these at your disposal. What I would say is have the WPA. Have it ready to go. The WPA, Works Progress Administration. Works Progress Administration is not going to be one of his earliest ones, but it's going to be one of his most long-lasting ones. It will do things like help finish the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, you got to be careful. The Golden Gate Bridge had been started prior to the Great Depression in order to help traffic go up the North Bay area, but it had run out of money when the Depression hit. And so here comes the federal government, and it basically kind of goes, whoop, here's some money, hire your guys. Again, the government is not hiring DMV-type Caltrans workers. The government is putting money and giving it to private contractors to finish this, but they're organizing the economy. They're organizing this to be done. So for those who've seen it, you'll see these WPA kind of things are all over the place. We also have the PWA, the Public Works Administration. And the Public Works Administration is going to build bigger things, usually like dams and stuff like that. So will the WPA, but it's kind of a size and scope kind of thing. So the PWA was building like bigger things. It'll end up finishing off the Hoover Dam, for example. Megatron must be contained. And later it will be named the Hoover Dam later in 1947 when the Republicans take over both the House and the Senate. They'll put it back to the name of the guy who helped kind of get it started, Hoover Dam, but it was called Boulder Dam all that time because who would want to give Hoover the credit for something when it wasn't there? So they're going to have to wait. If you go up to Chico, where I went to school, and I got influenza. My lungs have been horrible for years. When I went to Chico, this is a great big auditorium up there. It's the beautiful theater called Laxton Auditorium, and it was made by the WPA process. LaGuardia Airport, it was made by the PWA, WPA. So these are big rooms. Hitler was doing the same thing in the time period to keep the economy jump-started. And he's like, ja, and like, and you know, so we have these ideas, how ways to make people make roads. So some of our highway system is going to be created. Well, Hitler's doing the exact same thing. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is jump-starting the economy, and every time something opens, he gives a great big speech. He knows how to sell it like nobody's business. And so just like our other politicians know how to sell things, they're going to come along and kind of cozy up to stuff like the opening of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. Our country needs a truly great leader, and we need a truly great leader now. We need a great leader that wrote The Art of the Deal, so saith our now president when he was running. But anyways, the WPA is going to not only hire people to build stuff, they're going to hire people to do the things they used to do. So, for example, it's going to hire people to paint. Because if you're a professional painter, you probably are not ever going to get a job when there's like 25 people sitting in line for 2 or 3 jobs to build a dam, and you know no construction experience. Yours like, but I can hit a high C kind of a thing. I don't know if that's high C or not. But one way or another, they're going to hire people to do things. They hire people to put plays on. They're going to hire people to do all kinds of things. Theater, writing, painting. If you go to Coit Tower in San Francisco, the cool Coit Tower. The Coit Tower in San Francisco, inside of it, you're going to see these really cool murals that were basically artists hired to paint the life and the history of California in mural form at the bottom of the Coit Tower. It's really cool. So that was a WPA project. So the WPA is going to have all kinds of things. They're going to hire archaeologists to do archaeology stuff. They're going to hire historians to write history. They're going to hire people to do all kinds of things. So there's roads, there's schools. They're going to hire teachers to teach. They're even going to hire John Steinbeck to go out there and do some writing of the Okies and the Arkies that are being chased off their land because of the Great Depression's big dust bowls. And he will write Grapes of Wrath as part of this. I always love this quote. This I believe, that the free exploring mind of the individual human is the most valuable thing in the world, and I would fight for the freedom of the mind to take any direction it wishes, undirected. And this I must fight against any idea, religion, or government which limits or destroys the individual. This is what I am and what I'm about. More power to you, John Steinbeck. Anyways, we're going to be building dams all over the place. Dams, we're going to be building the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, which this one, let me see if I can get myself out of here for a second. This one has Franklin Delano Roosevelt down here in the bottom, kind of knocking on the door with his U.S. government organization plan, kind of like, come on, let me in. And in the background, you can see, if you can see it, politics is kind of muscling its way into like a big old catfish trying to get into the idea. Directorate power, waste, expenditure. So this cartoon is definitely not a pro-FDR cartoon. So if you found something like this in your document-based question, you would then say the bias of the artist is obviously with the conservative Republicans and the idea the government is going to basically blow it on anything they do, from waste to bad management, whatever, and you kind of point out things in the cartoon. But the bias, again, is just get in the head of the cartoon artist or the head of the person who wrote what they wrote. When it comes to bias recognition, it's really easy. Why do they say what they say? And you just point it out. You take a shot at understanding, and you don't have to be right. You just have to be thoughtful. because how could we even really know what it was that the actual person wanted? So the Tennessee Valley Authority is going to be the one area where the government is going to actually step in, own, and operate things in the Tennessee actual area of Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, some of the poorest parts of the country ever since the Reconstruction era, kind of just left them hanging with no Hamilton assumption plan for the South. It floods horribly. And so the idea of about 1,000-mile stretch, they're going to put in all kinds of dams and projects, and they're going to generate electricity. And then the electricity is going to be sold to the people pretty cheaply during the time period. We also have the CCC, and the CCC is going to be the Civilian Conservation Corps. So the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, there you go. Introduce yourself. Right on. So they're going to hire 17 to 28-year-olds, hundreds of thousands of these guys, millions by the time we're all said and done, to basically pull these men who more often than not don't really have a family to take care of. And this was one of the few alphabet agencies what was kind of more Roosevelt's idea. And they're going to pay them $1 a day, and 25 of that money will be sent home to mom and dad and the family. They will basically then live in a kind of dormitory slash military establishment. They're going to have all their money paid for. They're going to have all their stuff. They're going to get a chance to get a sweet tan, but they're going to be working for $1 a day. They get to keep $5 to buy cigarettes and stuff and work on, getting rid of that tank top that gives you that tan. And so these are going to be men who are, and if you notice, it's almost exclusively white. Only about maybe 1,000 blacks actually work, because there was a rumor out there that it would not accept blacks, but it did, but the rumor kind of stuck. Plus they would then serve in segregated kind of barracks of sorts. So what you have then is this military style thing where these men are going to go out into the countryside. About 3 million men will work in it by the time everything's said and done, and they will reforest stuff and work on their abs as best they can. So they're going to get food, they're going to get hats they can wear, they're going to basically be out there. They'll work 8-10 hours a day, but they will work to reforest things. And they're going to plant at the time period, because remember, we used to have like lumber companies coming in and just like clear cut stuff. They're going to replant 6 billion trees. Little trees, like little baby trees, and put them in there. There's one I'm looking out there. It doesn't look like it's doing so good. I got to get some water on it. And these civilian conservation camps will be a huge success. They're going to cut kind of roads that many of our forestry departments are still going to use when they fight fires in the backcountry. So this was a huge, big success. The government no longer does it at the national level, I think, but states have taken this over. And this is one of the areas where they're going to have the CCC will often work with the prison population and the youth authorities for kids that have screwed up. They can kind of get a high school education, maybe start in some college classes while still being watched. So more of the states have taken the CC over the years. Now, remember, Congress had then been called a special session under Hoover to help out farmers. Well, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is going to do it again. He's going to even call them out even bigger things, called the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Agency. The AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Agency, is going to take it a step farther. If farmers' biggest problem, we've been tracking this for a while, is that they are too good at growing things, meaning we make too much food. So if there's too much of something, then the price of something is going to go down to the point where farmers can't pay their dues, they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage, they can't pay their loans back to the banks because of their tractors being bought. Then it's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. So the only option is to plant less. Well, the problem is if I plant less, then I can't pay off the debt I owed from last year. So they're on that own vicious spiral that we talked about. So here comes the AAA, and it's real simple. He's holding a check. We will pay you to plant only 2/3 of what you planted last year, let's just say. And it varied from crop to crop. So the Agricultural Adjustment Agency is going to stop this downward spiral by paying farmers, to not farm. Now, the auctions had been happening prior to this because the farmers had just been spiraling. They got a little help under Hoover, but then it spiraled as soon as the stock market crashed. And these families are being kicked off these farms that sometimes have been held in their families for decades, going back to the Homestead Act of 1862. Some of these people passed down from generation to generation. If you can tell, on these auction days, people from the East Coast would come in sometimes to kind of buy this stuff at pennies on the dollar. So the bank basically is forcing the farmer to auction something because they owe money to the bank. So the bank basically owns the farm, and the farmer will come, they'll have this auction. The auctioneer will kind of stand up there and go like, hey, well, as things got more and more desperate in 1933, the farmers started taking matters in their own hands. If you want a parallel, this is Shays' Rebellion. We're on the verge of losing our farms. Screw that. We're going to march on the government to keep these foreclosure court hearings from happening. This is a picture of a bunch of pissed off farmers from an area making a court-appointed lawyer kneel and kiss the flag having broken up the actual hearing. So if there's no hearing, then there can be no foreclosure of the farm. Sometimes when people come out to the actual auction, they'd see these things hanging as they came out, in essence saying to people from the East Coast, you're trying to get pennies on the dollar farm, taking advantage of our neighbor, you better think twice. So what we have in the South is this thing is on the verge, and the West is a complete collapse as Franklin Delano Roosevelt takes over the presidency. And a lot of these are going to be these really young families. She doesn't look young, old enough in any way, shape, or form to have 1, 2, 3, 4 kids, which means having probably gotten pregnant almost every year of her married life. She probably got married around 14, 15, 16. Remember, the age of consent used to be 10 years of age. And she, in essence, is probably around maybe your age, 17, 18, maybe. And they are struggling to make ends meet. Sometimes they're wearing little burlap sacks because they don't have enough money for dresses or whatever. And some of the hardest working, just most sad stories are going to be these farmers who are losing their farms in this time period. And the auctioneer would come out and they'd say, oh, we got a farm at this base, everything's going to be sold. And do I hear 50? Do I hear 100? Do I hear 100,000? Or whatever. Now, I remember reading a couple stories out right before Franklin Delano Roosevelt introduced the AAA of a handful of farmers having scared off those Eastern investors. And this is an auction, right? So this guy goes, do I hear 20? And he can't just go like, no, we're going to stop the auction. I'll start tomorrow. You guys suck. You're not offering enough money. That he would start the auction saying, we have a farm that is worth like $35,000. In the top of times, I'm asking for $10,000. Do I hear 10,000? And from the crowd of neighbors who had grown up next to these poor farmers that are standing there horribly sad because they're losing their farm, they would basically go like 1,000. 1,000. I asked for 10,000. Did I hear 10,000? You heard me right. 1,000. And then it'd be like a quiet muttering through the thing. All right. Hearing no other offers 1,000 going once, 1,000 going twice, sold for 1,000. And then these guys would then talk. The one farmer who had said whatever, these neighbors of this guy would go like, all right, Bill. And they'd start talking to these guys, you know the drill. And they would cough up amongst themselves. They'd scrape $1,000. They'd give it to the bank auctioneer and say, now give me the damn deed. And they'd walk over and say, here, Bill, give me a penny. I'm going to sell you back your farm. Really cool stories. Really cool stories. Ooh, it freezes me when it does that. That's weird. So in other words, this is on the verge of collapse. So here comes then the AAA, the Farm Relief Bill. Now, remember, your job is to analyze bias in the documents. And if you see something like this, here's the taxpayer federal economy, the businessman, the ultimate consumer, and they're being chased down by the Farm Relief Bill. Woo! Let her go, Mr. President, U.S. farmer. So the actual thing is, don't crush them. That tells you that the artist who drew this is not a big fan of the Farm Relief Bill because the title of it says, don't crush these people, the ultimate consumer, the taxpayer, the businessman, while you try to save the farms. Over here, there will be some who don't get the principle of the thing at first. And what here's for not growing your 40 acres of cotton. And so Uncle Sam is paying this farmer for not doing work. And this guy then goes, what you doing, Rags? And he's asking that guy who's filling out the thing. And the guy, Rags, is basically saying, I'm making out my income tax for 1944. What do you suppose? Income tax. For not planting 1,000,000 acres of cotton. Give me $100 million. I'm not raising hogs. $500, $1,000. And so then you got this guy over here saying, I'm perfectly willing to not work 30 hours for the rest of my life. So this is where a lot of this gets this idea of a tax and spend. But the AAA is going to make him a huge hero for the farmers of America. And the problem with it is when the AAA goes into effect, we had already been harvesting and it's already planting season. So they can't do much other than they're ordered to start pouring out milk to raise the price of milk. They're ordered to slaughter pigs. They're ordered basically to slaughter calves to get meat prices to go up. So here's the sad irony of the AAA. There are people who are starving in the cities. And the AAA is forcing farmers out in the Midwest and the countryside, the rural America, to destroy their crops and ruin their milk while people are starving. So the common everyday looking of the FDR's AAA plan, it doesn't seem to make sense. And it really doesn't. But the farmers love it. It does help farmers. It does help their actual price go up. It does. And this cartoon obviously doesn't like it very much. This is Henry Wallace. He's Secretary of Agriculture, and he's being obviously portrayed as like Hitler in the time period. And here's this little Gestapo farmers going, yes, I will do what you tell us to, government, big government, controlling things. Here was the biggest problem, probably the AAA. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was probably our smartest president we've ever had when it comes to understanding politics. And what he understood is that in the South, blacks can't vote because of Reconstruction and the things we've talked about. So if I all of a sudden force the AAA to treat blacks the same as whites in the South, I will lose white voters in the solid South. Meaning, as a Democrat, because remember those solid Southern yellow dog Democrats don't vote for Republicans because that was Abraham Lincoln's thing. If I piss off the Southerners, I will lose the solid South, which is my base for power. I need to be able to hold on to the solid South. So the AAA does not ever have any regulations to help sharecroppers. And this particular cartoon shows a modern Simon Legree, and he's the AAA guy basically whipping out. So basically what happens is if the AAA pays farmers to not farm, what it does in the sharecropping South is that sharecroppers don't own the land, so they don't get any help from the AAA. But the actual former masters, or by this time period, the sons or sons of the former masters do own the land, and so they kick the sharecroppers off their land and get the money for that land. So what you have is this kind of reference to Uncle Tom's Cabin, and Simon Legree was the horrible slave master. He, in essence, is then wiping out. Well, what happens is a little kind of mini union of black and white sharecroppers in the South forms, but it never really gets anywhere. And then Mother Nature comes along and just beats the crap out of everything. So if you want overproduction, let me help you with overproduction. And we have years of drought that will end up causing what are known as the dust bowls, as this topsoil loses all of its moisture and the crops can't hold it in the land. And next thing you know, just whoom, these huge dust storms come through. That sound effect is you close your eyes, you can almost hear a dust storm coming through. And these dust storms would just plummet through, and it would be millions upon billions of tons of topsoil being picked up by these storms because everything is so drought ridden. And people would then just get all kinds of problems. They have like coronavirus masks at the time period, and it would just hammer it. It carried the dust all the way out to Washington, D.C. It carried out about 2,000 miles out to the Atlantic, and you'd have ships that would get dust inches thick sometimes as this topsoil. That is going to make it hard to be a farmer. So what you have then are a lot of people living in Oklahoma, Arkansas, the Texas Panhandle, down to Mississippi, Louisiana, but they're referred to as Okies and Arkies because Oklahoma and Arkansas are hit hardest. They will be, millions of these guys will start moving west to look for a new way to make life work because you can't farm when that topsoil is basically gone and all you have now is all this dried stuff. So these Okies and the Arkies are going to get hit by Mother Nature, and they're going to migrate out to California, the San Joaquin Valley, where a lot of them will end up taking up residence, and you still have kind of an Okie kind of country western kind of like mindset in California, in the Salinas Valley and the San Joaquin Valley, that are still kind of a mindset that goes back to this idea, this farmers kind of based theories. So these are pictures taken by one of the most famous of all photographers, Dorothea Lange. Dorothea Lange is going to also be hired by the WPA to take pictures and chronicle what's going on. She's a photographer, so she's paid to take photographs. Another element of this thing is the NRA, not the National Rifle Association, but the National Recovery Administration. And they're going to try to, there's Mayor LaGuardia. He's Fiorello LaGuardia. He'll be a governor of New York. He used to be a congressman. He's a Republican, but he is a very Teddy Roosevelt progressive Republican. So he gets along fine with Franklin Delano Roosevelt, gets a bunch of money for New York. And they will have a huge campaign. Remember those Woodrow Wilson heads to kind of show everybody that the Blue Eagle, that we're working. And it's this idea of a partnership between big business and worker unions. And it is going to try to regulate everything. Now's the time to buy. It's this huge, big woohoo. It is not the NRA, National Rifle Association. Ladies and gentlemen, do not get it confused. So the Supreme Court will eventually shoot it down in 1935. And they'll, in essence, say, no, the NRA doesn't need to exist. And the Roosevelt administration will follow 1935 under Francis Perkins by pushing through something called the Wagner Labor Relations Act. And that will basically, just keep it in simple terms, give workers the right to join unions. And that will be part of the FDR's New Deal that we're going to talk about later on as the 1935 time period kicks into gear and he starts to push things through like Social Security Act, the Revenue Holding Act. And the reason he does this is because the 1936 election is going to go to his head. You can see this is a cartoon that doesn't really like Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They're all his brains trust guys, just like, woo, depleting the resources of the soundest government in the world, woo! And over here you have Leon Trotsky saying, spend, spend, spend. And Stalin over here going, no, how red the sunrise is getting. So he's obviously not a fan. And this one over here, this little kid's writing the word Roosevelt, and that little girl saying, Mother, Wilford wrote a bad word. So this is obviously making fun of the rich people who don't like it. So you got one who hate FDR, I want to like him. But FDR in 1936 is going to, despite people criticizing the government is getting in like a banyan tree into everything that we do in life, and some people are criticizing him for not doing enough. The fastest growing political party in America was the German American Bund. In other words, Americans who say what we need in America is a Hitler. Adolf Hitler will become Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1938, which means he was loved in 1937. So the 1936 election is going to reverse things. Remember, this is 28, Hoover's big win against Alfred Smith, the Catholic. The KKK is going to come out, and he will only win the Salt South because they really do hate Lincoln still. And the 1932 election, then Roosevelt's going to just kick the crap out of Hoover. But then look at the 1936 election. 1936 election, here we go. Alf Landon, governor of Kansas, he won't even win his own state. You know you don't. You don't even win your own state. He wins 2 states, Maine and Vermont. And that's all he gets. Look at the electoral college win. Woo. The actual popular vote, a little closer, but not too bad. So Roosevelt gets a big win, and the 1936 election is seen as the class warfare. He actually says, I know that about a good chunk of the country hates me because I'm taxing them, and they don't like my big government, but I welcome their hatred. I actually love it. And he has a big win. Took a look at the Senate. 76 Democrats, 16 Republicans. What that means is, if you look at the Senate as we have it now with 100 of them, like the 16 are like they're overstuck by the men's room in the Senate chambers. And the rest of this is like just Roosevelt will get stuck. It will go to his head, and it will become what we know as the court packing plan. So I want to stop here because we're going to connect this later on to the beginning of World War II and why we stand by the side for 2 full years, letting the world go to hell in a handbasket. And it has to do with this huge win of 1936 and it going to the head of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he will start to act like a dictator, just like Germany's got. Anyways, we'll hit that later on. That is the end of this one. Enjoy. Happy days are here.